One sentence I was very struck by towards the end of your book is where you said that James, meaning William James, is very rarely wrong.
Yes.
And I've been reading the varieties of religious experience since I was a schoolboy and found it fascinating always. What do you think about his famous distinction between once born and twice born? Did that, were you aware of thinking about that before you sort of instantiated it in the hemisphere idea?
I wasn't, but in the writing, I did incorporate that exact saying of James, because I think that there are some people who are lucky enough to be sort of once born, but most of us have to be twice born. We have to go through suffering to find these things. And I think that's probably right. There are these very exceptional individuals who seem to have a kind of rare, intuitive understanding. But yeah, I mean, on James, I mean, I just want to pay homage. I think he was one of the most important philosophers of the last 150 years. And the pragmatists in general, C.S. Peirce, John Dewey, American pragmatists, very, very important.
I mean, shall I move on, or because I know that there's a lot, we have limited time, and I'm sure there's a lot probably you might want to ask of Iain. But one of the things I think that reminds me of a lot that you write about is how you talk about the artist in doing that, in that rediscovering process. You said the sort of creative imagination neither just sees nor just creates, but brings into existence through combination of both, rendering the authorship of what emerges ambiguous. And this is how we bring all our world into being.
Yes.
And it strikes me that it's what you talk about with the intentional fallacy as work, good work, free art. In Shakespeare, you talk about Wordsworth, and I'd say Philip Pullman probably too. As good art goes out into the world and is recontextualized all the time, that's the ambiguity that you're sort of aspiring to.
Yes, I mean, what I want to avoid at all costs, and I spend the first few pages of the introduction on, is falling into one of two positions that people commonly adopt. One is that there just is a truth out there that's completely independent of the knowing of it, and it's our job to find a straight path to it. That's the sort of thing theory of truth that the left hemisphere would embrace. And I'm contrasting, and there is another group of people who are postmodernists, I suppose, of a certain persuasion, who hold the opposite, that there is no truth at all, that we make everything up and therefore everything's as good as everything else. I think both of these are utterly disastrous positions. There is truth, very, very importantly. Otherwise, there'd be no point in saying anything or doing anything at all for any of you. So it's a question of deciding what is more true and in what context it is true. And it's that process through which we encounter. Everything is an encounter or a relationship. There aren't things. That's the matter with things is a pun on a number of levels, but one is that we believe the world is made up of material things. But I believe that relationships are even more important than the things. I don't mean just morally important. I think they are prior ontologically to the things that get related. And that's not such a crazy idea as it may sound to you. And I know physicists who will support this idea, that relationships are actually the primary thing that the cosmos exists in, and not just things. So sorry, my idea, just to finish, and then I hand over, but is that the world comes into being through our relationship with it, and it's not just made up by us, but it's also not just some remote, nothing to do with us out there. It comes into being through the coming together of the two.
The physicist Carlo Rovelli, in his latest book, Helgoland, comes to a very similar conclusion, that things are what they are because of the relationships between them. And I found that very interesting. The nature of quantum physics and the mysteriousness of things as you get smaller and smaller is very present to you. I think it is to me. I don't fully well, no. So who was it who said if you understand it, you haven't, you've got it wrong?
Yes, quite, yes.
That was Richard Feynman or somewhere.
Yes.
But it is a most extraordinary world that we're living in. It's very big and it's very small, and we're about the midpoint of those two things. But we're quite well placed to see the very large and the very small, both with the aid of science and its instruments, and with the aid of the imagination, which helps us to see the context of things, the Gestalt, and so on. And physicists are becoming more and more sure that reality is not a matter of little billiard balls that knock into each other. And people who say it is, exponents of the nothing buttery school, Francis Crick, no less, who said the entire apparatus of poetry and life and art and everything is nothing more than the movement of atoms and molecules. Well, it bloody well is. It's a great deal more than that. And people who get stuck at that level are not seeing what's really there, I think.
I love all that. I like your mention of the billiard balls as well, because one of the things I would just say is that although it's true that we're used to thinking of quantum mechanics as operating at a very small scale, which it does, it also operates right across the field. And, we sort of have an idea that Newtonian mechanics works well in the middle, but at the extremes of very large and very small, there's a quantum universe. Actually, there's a quantum universe right across the entire spectrum, from the most minute to the largest. It's just that a Newtonian approximation works quite well if you want to build a garage. So, that's the point. And so when you come to the quantum thing, people say, oh yes, but that only operates at the very small, but I really want to banish that. I've learned from physicists that it operates at every level, and it's one of the reasons why the notion of a predictable billiard ball universe, Laplace's 18th century concept, is completely out of the window. I mean, there is no question that there are the movements of atomic particles are not fully knowable, not because we don't have enough knowledge or better machines, but because they're intrinsically unknowable and unpredictable. But when you come to the everyday level, there's a lovely image from one physicist that I quote in the book, which is, if you imagine billiard balls colliding, uncertainty comes into the position of those collisions at a certain point. And I thought, well, I suppose so. How many collisions might there have to be before you notice this quantum uncertainty? Perhaps 1 million, or perhaps only 10,000. The answer is 8. 8 collisions. After that, it's not fully predictable. It is fascinating.
I knew on my way here that we were going to have not nearly enough time, and every single question goes off into another possible hour of discussion. Just before I open it up to audience questions, let's just have a quick look at what is happening to the world because of the sort of domination of the right hemisphere by the left hemisphere, which we've spoken about, which of course you write about a great deal in the book. I mean, the left hemisphere, if it dominates, as you say, it gives us the idea that we are manipulate things. And how does that disturb the world as we know it? I mean, of course, the natural world comes to mind, given the week that we're having with COP26 and the way we view nature as something that we can just manipulate and do as we like with, for our own use.
Yes, I mean, the view that nature is just a heap of resource for us to use is a very obvious case in point. But it goes very, very much further than that, because we have this, unfortunately, very simple bureaucratic model, really, like some very poor local government's idea of how to make something happen, a chain of linear events that will bring about a result. But actually, when you go too far in any one direction, you find you've achieved the exact opposite. And at the end of the book, I produce a long passage of paradoxes that we find. We set out to do this, we achieve the precise opposite. Why is this? Well, I have a whole chapter on what's called the coincidence of opposites, that in fact, the cosmos is not this linear model like this, but that actually opposites are powerfully related. And when you are not aware that in espousing one thing, you are espousing also its opposite and bringing the dark side into being, then really bad things happen in society. And unfortunately, I feel that we now live in a world in which positions are so polarized, conversations are so schematized. There is no room for subtlety, for nuance, for seeing that, in fact, the opposite also has something to be said for it. If we could get back there, we might possibly be worth saving, but it's up for grabs whether we can save ourselves. People talk about saving the planet. The planet will look after itself, and something better will come along. But actually, I have a soft spot for human beings. I'm rather sad to think that we will be extinguishing ourselves.
Yes, it's civilization that's fragile, not nature.
Absolutely.
Nature will survive whatever we throw at it, but will civilization? I hope so. I hope so very much. But it doesn't look as if we've got the right cast of mind to do that. We need to... well, I was very struck by your last chapter, where you talk about the sense of the sacred. And this sense that we have lost, generally, a sense that there is something beyond us and our families and our societies and our politics, beyond that, to which we are somehow connected, and in the light of which we somehow understand who we are and why we're here and what we're doing. That used to be religion, of course. That used to be the parish church, and the larger church beyond that, and beyond that, the sense that there was a great cosmic drama that had taken place, and we are part of that. That is a terrible thing to have lost. Now, it's impossible to believe literally now in the things that it seems to be describing. Richard Dawkins doesn't think it's impossible. He thinks that religious people all do believe literally in Adam and Eve and so on. He's quite wrong. But it's difficult now. And yet, I'm fully in agreement with Iain that we need something. We need something that is more important than we are, so that we can relate to it, so that we can find our own sense of importance and meaning, meaning to each other, and to the society we live in, and to the planet we live on, and to the cosmos beyond that. We need that, and it doesn't seem to be provided by the church anymore.
Do you see it provided anywhere? Because you describe all the way through the book it as a Western contemporary problem. Do you see any cultures existing today where you feel hope that they're getting it right?
Well, yes, unfortunately, though, our own culture is so dominant now and so widespread and so aggressively pushed by commerce. It's effectively capitalism gone wild. It is driving the destruction of other cultures very, very fast. I went to Romania a couple of years ago, and it has survived invasions by Tatar hordes. It had survived the Nazis. It had survived Stalinism. And in only 10 years, it had collapsed in the face of capitalism, with people becoming unhappy, miserable, uprooted, saying they no longer knew where they belonged, and, you know, the destruction of an ancient way of life. Now, if you take that round the world, the most valuable people from whom we could learn are people who do preserve this very sense. They don't need churches for it, but they preserve this sense that Philip is talking about. And we are destroying their cultures and their habitat. That's as grievous as destroying animals and plants. So, yes, I think that is the problem. But you said, is there any hope? I think there is, because I think, you see, wherever I go, I find an audience of people of all ages who respond very warmly to the message that we've been sold a pup, that the Dawkinses of this world have told us it's all very simple, and it just isn't as simple as that at all. And they want to understand more. And so it's that wanting, because if we powerfully want another vision, we can be led there. And all I can do in the book is say, my friend, let me take you by the hand, let me show you a landscape, a country, which I think is absolutely real. I think you will recognize it. I don't think you'll be shocked and think this is very different. You'll say, gosh, I knew this all along, but somehow it has been drummed out of me. And it's that Philip started by saying, and that so many readers have responded to me on the Master and His Emissary anyway.
I think I'm going to take it to the audience questions. But actually, you could quickly say about your message. I've heard you talk about it before. You feel, apart from all the negative and the worries that you have, a general feeling of hope, don't you?
Well, I am always conscious that hope is a virtue, not a tendency or a disposition. Hope is one of the virtues.
Yes.
And it's something you should do because it's a good thing to do. So, yes, I am hopeful because we should be. Virtue.
Yes? You're going to extend that? Shall I take it to the audience? Oh, I thought you were about to carry on.
I was just reminding people that hope is a virtue. It's something you do, and it's good.